In this video, I'll be going through the Task 2 section of an past year Individuals and Societies e-assessment paper. So this is actually a continuation from the previous video where I discussed the Task 1 section. So it's basically the same paper, just a continuation. So let's go through this question. In this task, you will explore the key concept of change and use your communicating skills to gain support for a change and how resources are used to generate energy. Your responses will be assessed using criterion A, knowing and understanding, and criterion C, communicating. In this task, you will take on the role of an entrepreneur who wants to have a positive impact on society by producing energy. Entrepreneurs develop elevator pitches when they need support to produce and sell their products. Before writing your own, watch the video below for guidance on how to develop an effective elevator pitch. So let's go through the instructions first. For task 2, for INS task 2, it's especially important to read the instructions because there are certain details that are more important when it comes to your writing later on, more so than the essay that you'll have to do in task 3. For instance, if we just generally look at the instructions, the most important piece of information that we can get is that we'll have to gain support for a change in how resources are used to generate energy. So we're supporting some sort of change. And I'll be taking on the role of an entrepreneur who wants to have a positive impact on society by producing energy. And I will be developing an elevator pitch. So when it comes to task 2, the format is very important because more so than task 3, it doesn't really bother much about the format. They wouldn't really deduct your marks that much on it. Format plays a big role in task 2. So task 2 is one where you'll have the most variation in the formats the question could possibly ask you. So here they're asking you about an elevator pitch in which you're an entrepreneur. You want to talk about a change in energy usage, the way energy is produced, and you're talking about it from the perspective of an entrepreneur. So that's what you understand from the instructions. So of course, the e-assessment wouldn't expect you to know what an elevator pitch is. So they actually provided a video explaining what an elevator pitch is. But along with that, they also provided a transcript of what the video is about. So I didn't really include the video. So you could just read through this transcript to understand basically what is an elevator pitch and what makes a good elevator pitch, which they sort of highlight here. It's mainly just for you to be able to write it because it's not something you hear in your day-to-day life. But it's pretty much the same thing as a speech, except that it rides on the concept that within the time you use an elevator, you should be able to give a short but concise speech that is persuasive and delivers your point. So taking a look at the question, you are an entrepreneur, here you state this, wants to have a positive impact on society by starting a new company that produces energy using one of the resources below. Create a script for an elevator pitch in which you explain why your company should receive support from potential stakeholders. So one thing we can just see generally is that all of these are renewable sources. So this is definitely one of the benefits that we will be talking about later in the speech. It's basically the direction that the question is trying to take you. So the energy source that I selected is the sun. So just so you know, this is pretty much a perfect answer that will score you full marks based off of the criteria. So starting off with the first paragraph, this format is based entirely off of an elevator pitch. So you start off with an introduction, good morning, anything, and introduce yourself, what's your name, and why are you giving this elevator speech. So the first thing you can think of generally in any type of speech is that you'll have to identify a problem. So, but the question doesn't exactly give you a clear problem for you to focus on, so you'll have to deduce that on your own. But we can already see that previously here, they mentioned that you as an entrepreneur, you want to gain support for a change in how resources are used to generate energy, which means that there's a problem with how energy is generated at the moment. And judging by the fact that all of the energy sources provided to you are renewable sources, you can most likely guess that the problem is that non-renewable sources are used nowadays. So that's how you can base off of your problem. As long as it makes sense by the context, you will be marked appropriately. So what I chose oil as my main problem. This is where you discuss the main problem. So I talked about oil and the problems that oil provides. For example, they provide oil spills, biodiversity. These are generally just problems I explained here. And I also considered the fact that it's a non-renewable source and how it could impact our world later on because we're using energy for almost everything. And eventually oil may not be enough. So this is a very important point that you'll have to include because they're basically nudging you in this area by only providing you renewable resources. So I generally just provided 2 main points with 2 paragraphs. And this is where I introduce my solution. So this is where solar energy comes in. I first explain the principle of solar energy, how it works from a scientific point of view. And after that, I explain the benefits of solar energy, which includes how environmentally friendly it is. It can be used anytime, it can be stored. And you can see that I also give solutions to some disadvantages. For instance, there are nights without sunlight, but solar energy can be easily stored into battery banks. So I give a solution to a problem that the person listening to you would possibly think of. And besides that, here I also give another benefit, but I give the benefit from the perspective of a consumer. This is important because you have to realize that you're talking from the perspective of an entrepreneur who wants to start a company. So as an entrepreneur, the first person you should think of are your consumers who would be buying your product. And why do you think that they would be interested in what you have to offer? So therefore, you have to show them why consumers would be interested in your company as well. Because it's not all about making just a positive impact on the world as an entrepreneur. So just talked about why it's an inexpensive energy source for consumers. There'll be an initial investment, but in the long run, it requires low maintenance and therefore customers would be attracted to this type of product. And then I sort of gave a summary of everything, saying it's environmentally friendly, inexpensive, and reliable. This is basically a summary of almost all my points that I mentioned. And just a reiteration of what my elevator speech is about, and a thank you. We can generally see that it's not too long, but this is the length that you should be keeping for an elevator pitch. Because the moment you go longer than this, even if it's the best speech in the world, it doesn't really fit with the concept of an elevator pitch that just by the name you should know. It should be short, it should fit within that ride in an elevator. So this is part of that criteria where it's part of communication. So you shouldn't keep it too long, you should keep it short and concise. And another thing that you can see that I do time to time is I use phrases in order to interact with the audience because that's how a speech is. When it comes to a speech, you should not make it seem like you're writing an article, that you're not talking to anyone. So time to time, you can see I say stuff like, do you know the most commonly used energy source today? It's a question, and stuff like, but fret non, and then what? With all said and done, and just simple stuff like thank you and good morning. It's all just acknowledging the fact that you're talking to an audience, you're trying to engage an audience, and that's very important for the communicating criteria that this question holds. So the knowledge and understanding part is given by how you explain your problem, how you explain the solution, but the way you deliver your speech and the way you deliver your information, the language you use, the way you engage the audience, that all falls under communication, and it'll help you score in INS Task 2. So just generally for Task 2 and INS, the most important thing would be to recognize what you're writing first rather than like the information that you're going to put in first. Recognize what you're writing, who you're writing it for, why are you writing it. After you know that, it's easier to organize the information and you can pick out information to include. And that will be the end of this video. Thank you for watching.